Hi, it's Robbin McManne here. I'm the host of Parenting Our Future. And if you're listening to this podcast, I want to thank you so much for being here. I also want you to know that I am a former angry mom. I used to yell and rage and threaten and punish my kids because I wasn't getting the cooperation or the behavior that I felt I should be getting. And I struggled for many years not knowing how to change or knowing what to do differently. It wasn't until I found the world of peaceful parenting that I learned why my kids acted the way they did, and also why I was so angry and triggered. I was able to heal my anger and leave my triggers behind so that I could focus on being the calm and confident parent I always expected myself to be. I can tell you that feeling connected to your kids is the best feeling in the world. My two boys are teenagers now, and we have a strong relationship that is rooted in deep connection. And where there is connection, there's cooperation. Parenting is the most important job we do, but it's the hardest job we do. And we do it without understanding the fundamentals of the way our kids grow and develop. And we do it without knowing the way their brains work or what their behavior is actually really telling us. So it's no wonder it's so hard. And it's okay to ask for help. It's okay to say, this is harder than I thought it would be. And that's where I come in. I can help you and I can support you so that you can have the cooperation and enjoy being a parent. You can book a free call with me on my website, parentingforconnection.com. And if you want to download my free guide, How to Turn a No into Cooperation, go to triggerfreeparents.com. I really hope you enjoy the show. Thanks for listening. Hello, everybody. Welcome back to another episode of Parenting Our Future. Okay, so I get this question a lot. I get a question like, how do I parent when I'm married to a narcissist? And, it's a word that is thrown around a lot, and I want to get some clarification on that. And so I have somebody here who's going to teach us about that. I have Heidi Brocke here. And so here's the thing. I want to understand better what a narcissist is, understand what one is and what one isn't, right? Because there's different things. We hear about personality, what do you call that? Personality,
disorders.
That's what I'm looking for.
Bipolar person. Yeah.
Yeah, that's right. So we hear about people who have personality disorders. Is that the same as being a narcissist? What about somebody who gaslights you? Is that somebody who's also a narcissist? So we are here to learn about all of this. And Heidi, Dr. Heidi, is here to talk to us about that. Let me tell you a little bit about Heidi. She is a toxic relationship awareness and healing specialist. After spending 14 years in an extremely emotionally and narcissistically abusive relationship, she broke the chains and turned her past into her passion. I love that. And today she has helped hundreds rid and heal their toxic relationships. And she also hosts a popular podcast. So you can hop on and listen to her podcast called It's Not Normal, It's Toxic, and rid your life of toxic people. And she's got millions of people listening to her podcast. Dr. Heidi, welcome. I'm so happy to have you here.
Thank you. Actually, this has been a long time coming because it's actually been on the schedule for a while. So when it was finally here, I was like, yes.
Yeah.
Yes,
And
it's
so
great to be here.
It is hard enough to parent. It's hard enough to parent with a co-parent. Mm-hmm. But what happens when you have a parent that you're co-parenting with, a partner who is toxic, who is a narcissist? So I really just want to start out by asking you, what are we talking about? What is your definition of a narcissist? And then what are some red flags that we come up against that we can say, oh, whoa.
Okay. So the first thing I always tell all the listeners is I am not a licensed mental health professional. I am a chiropractor, acupuncturist by trade, which means I don't diagnose and I don't treat mental health conditions. If your neck is stuck, I can totally help you. But so I come from the point of view where I talk a lot about, even my title is a toxic relationship specialist, because I chose the word toxic 7 years ago when I started this business, and it was before the word toxic was all over social media. So I like to give the definition of toxic because in the line of work that I'm doing, this sounds awful when you first hear me say it, but at the conclusion of what I'm talking about, you'll get it. I don't care if they have a diagnosis. I don't care if they're a narcissist. I don't care if they're bipolar. I don't care if they have an addiction. I don't, because at the end of the day, the question for you is the relationship healthy for you? So toxic is not a diagnosis. Toxic is an adjective that is used to describe any relationship for you in the status that it's in that may be unhealthy for you physically, mentally, or emotionally.
Okay.
You know, and on your podcast, obviously, everybody's thinking the intimate relationship, you know, the marriage or the intimate relationship. But there's toxic relationships can be friendships, they can be in coworker situations, they can be in family circles. So when you talk about the toxic relationship or the toxic person, you are the only one that gets to decide if this person is toxic for you or not. It's whether or not this person is putting you into a situation in a relationship that is not healthy for you.
Okay, so can I just ask a couple things? So first and foremost, is narcissism a mental illness?
Narcissism is a narcissistic personality disorder is a diagnosis. But to your point right now, it's the buzzword. So it's heard very much and it's used in the wrong context and it's used, you know. So I have learned to in my support group online and in my podcast and the things that I do, I really avoid that word because right now the correct definition of it is not being used. And honestly, because it's a mental health condition, it's not being very respected as a mental health condition. I have just chosen that those people with that type of personality do not fit well in my life. But at the same time, they're still people. So we have to accept them for who they are and allow them to be them, you know.
Well, and if it is a diagnosed mental illness, it's not a choice, right? Right. And so, okay, so that's good. And then can somebody be toxic to you in a relationship, but not be toxic to somebody else in a relationship?
Yes. And that's a question that I think that's a lot of times too, what makes it so confusing.
Yeah.
And when we look at, and I kind of want to lay the groundwork here so that we can move on to the, you know, the questions that you have, but what you have to realize is the motivation behind a toxic person's behavior are very intentional. And if you have somebody who's in a toxic relationship, in a toxic marriage, or somebody who's been raised in a toxic environment and then stepped into a toxic marriage, or someone who has had repetitive toxic relationships in their life, the chances of that person being a personality that's kind, caring, loving, giving, the fixer, the supporter, the conflict avoider, the peacekeeper, okay, those type of people are going to be more of a target for the toxic personality because of what drives the toxic personality. Okay, so and if we're talking to, if your listeners are like trying to go through a divorce right now or trying to co-parent, this is an imperative part of them getting a different perspective on what they're in, because the toxic personality, and that can be there's all different levels of toxic. Okay, it can be the bully on the playground all the way up to the things we see in the news, right? But what drives the toxic personality, and again, I have to tell you, this is all coming from my experience and my experience with dealing with people. What drives the toxic personality is insecurity in themselves. Now,
of course.
So now when we're in these situations, we can logically look at them and say, I don't think this relationship is healthy for me. But because we are the emotionally wired type, when emotions get involved, it clouds our logic and we get all confused.
Yeah.
Right. So like in the work that I do, which is different from a therapist or a counselor, I do a ton of education because I spent 14 years in one not having a clue what I was in. You know, I kept trying to change myself or fix myself or be a better wife or make him happy. And, you know, I was constantly adjusting myself to become what he needed, not realizing I was never going to become what he needed.
It was never about you to begin with.
Right. And I never knew that. Right.
Yeah.
So once I removed myself and I was able to look back, I realized, you know, because of their motivation for security in themselves, they need people in their life to supply them with certain things. Now, you know, if I told you, think of a time in your life when you felt super secure and like your life was going your way. You'd go, oh, when my work was going well and my kids were doing good and I had a great friend group and I was in the gym 3 times a week. We know that the stuff we put into our own life is the stuff that makes us feel secure. And the toxic personality does not have the ability to do that. So they have to place people in their life that supply them with the things that they need to feel secure. So, and those are things like control, the feeling of power, attention, admiration. So for the listeners who are in these relationships or you've been in repetitive, it's because our personality is the personality that's going to supply them with the things that they need in their life to feel secure.
Okay, it's the insecurity that drives the toxicity, and what they're looking for is control, power, attention, admiration, because they themselves, within themselves, are so small, really, right? And so they want to feel big, they want to feel in control and powerful, because inside they really aren't. Now, you said, as you started, that that essentially toxicity begets a toxic person, right? So when you're brought up in a toxic environment, that can create not a loving, kind-hearted, empathetic person, but possibly a toxic person that goes on to repeat the cycle. Is that what you said? Did I hear that right?
No, it's more like if you grew up in an environment that's toxic, and then even if you have a emotionally driven personality, when you step out into your own life, that stuff is going to be so normal to you that if you're approached by the toxic personality, you would never know it because you've always been in it.
Okay. And so, that is clear. I just wasn't sure. Thank you for clarifying that. And then you said that the motivation behind a toxic person is intentional. So is it intentional in that I'm intentional about needing control, power, attention, and admiration, just to throw those 4 ones out again?
Well,
or is it that I'm intentional about controlling you, regardless of whether it hurts you?
Well, it's kind of the same thing, because your toxic personality does not have the same emotion, nor do they have the empathy. So as long as
empathy is huge.
Yeah. So as long as they're getting from you what they need, they don't really care. That sounds awful, but they don't really care how it affects you.
At what cost it comes
to
you.
Right. And you have to, you tread on thin ice here too, because there is also a reason that this person is insecure. It could be a traumatic upbringing. It could be a diagnosis. It could be an addiction. And as emotional people, when we know that that's what's feeding their security, we feel bad for them, which makes us pour that much more into it and cater to them that much more.
Right.
So like if you have somebody that's then moving through the divorce process, if they realize this is the toxic relationship, I'm going to file for divorce, and the toxic person really realizes this is happening, their mind doesn't shift from the control, power, attention, and admiration. It just shifts to, okay, if this is really happening, what strings do I still have attached that now I can control them with? So like in your case, in the co-parenting case, it's the divorce process, the kids, and the finances. And while you were in the relationship, and most people that have been in toxic marriages will tell you, I tried to leave 3 or 4 times and I went back. And the other thing that we have to remember about the toxic personality is they're emotionally abusive. Okay, what does that mean? If they can say or do something that makes you feel something, they feel in control of your emotions, which then makes them feel secure. So if they can say or do something that makes you happy or makes you sad or makes you feel guilty or makes you upset or makes you cry or makes you fearful, all they have to do is say or do something and you're upset. That immediately makes them go, oh, all I have to do is say this or say that, which makes us cater, put our emotions towards them. So when we try to leave, they throw the guilt trip on us, or they're mad at us, or they threaten us and make us fearful. And we don't want to upset them. So we always try, to cater to them to keep them happy.
Wow.
So we tend to, and I was ashamed the day I counted this up finally, but I went back 7 times to my former.
Yeah. Yeah. But that is normal. It's not easy. And unfortunately, when you do make that break, that's when there can be violence. And that is a scary thing, especially when you are not just caring for yourself and you have children. It is no joke. So I can empathize with that. I can understand
Now,
that.
and you just brought up the violence thing. So when we go back to the emotion, they're looking for an emotional reaction. And this is how abuse escalates. If the first time they ever called you a name, you got upset. Okay, perfect. They got a reaction. But if they call you that name every day for 21 days, you're eventually going to not even notice they're calling you that name. So you're not going to react like you did the first day. So then what happens? The names get meaner, the voice gets louder. And then if that gets normal, then they'll punch a wall or they'll break something. And then if you're not reacting to that, then, they stand in the doorway or they break your phone and so they're constantly seeking that emotional reaction. And the more desensitized we become to it, the less we react, which is why things become violent.
Absolutely. Wow. That's a really good point. I mean, it makes sense, unfortunately.
Yeah.
Okay. So for those, so we're talking about toxic people. I like that we're not using the narcissist word because it does complicate things. It's a buzzword, and so can you, and I don't know if you can you narrow down some red flags for people listening, for them to sort of think, yeah, maybe this relationship maybe I can't change him or her. Maybe it is who they are and this isn't good for me. So what are some red flags?
Yeah. And while I say the red flags, I want you to think about what I said with the insecurity is what they're looking for.
Okay.
So we're building a flow chart really quick. Insecurity is what they're looking for. They need to use other people to feel control, power, attention, admiration. And they use the character traits of the toxic person. Some people call them red flags. Some people call them tactics. So they use red flags on people to get those 4 things so they feel secure. So it's basically a flow chart. So when you see things like criticism, comparison, the name calling we already talked about, belittling, if you think about that and ask yourself, which one of those 4 things are they seeking? Okay, that's the bully on the playground technique. If I can make you feel bad, I feel power, which makes me feel secure, right? So a lot of you'll hear a lot of people, well, I can never do anything right, and all he does is criticize, and they nitpick, and they, it's because that makes them feel powerful. And if they get a reaction on top of it, that makes them feel in control as well. And where is your attention when they're calling you names? Well, it's on them. So they're getting 3 of the 4 things just by criticizing. Other red flags are a toxic person is never going to take the blame. You will take the blame for everything. They will deny any mistreatment. You will hear things like, I'm sorry I got mad, but you pushed my buttons. Okay, so that's not an apology. You will very seldom hear an apology from a toxic personality unless there's strings attached. So, and I'm sorry, but you is them making you take responsibility for their behavior.
Right.
And for those of you who are listening that have had the experience of when you left or when you filed for divorce or when you decided to end the relationship, that's when these ginormous apologies came. I'm so sorry. I know I treated you wrong. I disrespected you. We'll do date nights every night and I'll take you on vacations. And, and okay, we have to ask ourselves, what is prompting that apology? Well, they are feeling the loss of control. Right. And for those of you who are right now in the middle of this or in the middle of a divorce, you have to remember it is not about the relationship at all. It is about the loss of control over you that makes them feel insecure. So when you're getting this overgrown apology, it's not because of the love and for the salvaging the relationship that they don't want to lose. It's about losing the control over you, which makes them feel insecure.
Okay.
And we only know how to see the world through our eyes.
Yeah.
So when they behave a certain way, you and I go, how come you just can't be nice? Like, why don't you just act normal? When in reality, they only see the world through, I don't know what I'm going to do today, but I got to see who's in my life that can supply me with these 4 things so I feel secure.
Yeah, it's kind of sad.
Yeah, it is. It is very sad. And I should go back a little bit because you said earlier, so these are intentional. Now, there was several things that went on in my former relationship that were 100% intentional to get what they needed. Like cheating on you, or, hiding money behind your back, or things like that. Those are intentional, seeking for power or seeking for attention. But on a day-to-day basis and the day-to-day interactions, it is so subconscious for them to be programmed self-centeredly in order to seek that self-security. It's almost like when you're in the grocery aisle and you bump into somebody. You don't step back and go, okay, well, should I apologize? Like, was that my fault? Did they bump into me? We go, oh, I'm so sorry. It's that quick of second nature. And they are so driven for that security in themselves that the things that they do on a day-to-day basis is just second nature for them.
Yeah. I can see that definitely. So some of those red flags, right? Understanding they're all driven by insecurity. So criticism, name calling, comparison, won't take the blame, won't apologize, denies, mistreatment.
Instilling fear is another one. And that's not always fear for your physical safety. That's fear of upsetting them, fear of making them mad, fear of disappointing them.
Okay.
You'll also run into quite a few people who will say, I don't know, I feel like I lost my support system. Because the toxic personality is going to try to cut off anything from you that gives you emotional support, because they want you dependent on them emotionally. So family and friends and hobbies and activities that are taking up too much of your time or fulfilling you emotionally, they're going to make it difficult by saying things like, well, your family doesn't like me, or you spend too much time with your family, or your friends aren't a good influence. And what we tend to do is, it's much easier for us to have conflict with those people than have conflict with the toxic person. So we start quitting our hobbies. We stop going to the gym. We start cutting our friends out until pretty soon the only person we have is them. And then we're very fearful to leave them because that's the only person we have.
Yeah. Wow. And here's why you are so important, is because, and I think the work that I do is important too, because we all have blind spots. When we're in it, we can't necessarily see what we're in. And I have blind spots with my own parenting and my own stuff. Right. And so sometimes we need somebody with no skin in the game to say, hey, you know what, this is actually what's really happening. This is what your child really wants from in my work, right? This is what your child's actually asking for. And I bet if you did this, this would be the result, right? So I'm sure that's a huge help what you're offering people when they realize they are in this, how they're being manipulated and controlled and that sort of thing.
Yeah. So then you have to move on to, okay, so if I am a personality that's going to attract these people, and I can't cut every one of these out of your life, if you have to co-parent, or if it's a parent of your own,
right,
or if it's a child of your own, you can't completely cut them out. So we have to learn how to interact with them without feeding them the things that they're wanting from you.
Oh, I think that's a whole other podcast episode, really, because there are people in our lives, mine included, who are not, that I have no choice but to.
So when I work with clients one-on-one, we go through all the education, but we also go, okay, but now you have to learn how to interact with these people, because this is not the last toxic personality you're going to attract. So you have to know what the red flags are, and then you have to be able to adjust yourself in how you interact with them so that it doesn't affect you. So I do a ton of holding hands with co-parenting with a toxic personality. And I often talk about, when I talk about on my own podcast, the day I ran away, and I'm certain that you will have listeners that will go, oh my gosh, I can't believe she just said that. The day I ran away from my former, I had already been divorced for 2 years. And nothing changed. Wouldn't sign a parenting plan so that nothing was accountable, wouldn't let me sell my half of the business. He wouldn't buy my half out. He wouldn't split the property, wouldn't anything. So sure, you can have divorce papers, but nothing changed for 2 years. And it started getting bad because I started standing up for myself. And the minute I started taking control, like you said, things escalated and got, so when I ran away, I had already been divorced for 2 years and nothing changed. So when I work with people that are trying to co-parent and think that all of a sudden this person is going to be a good co-parent, you have to realize it's not about the relationship, and it's not about the co-parenting relationship. It's 100% about the control that they have over you. So if you keep giving them that control, they're going to stay in your life and you're going to still feel very controlled. So I did a hard cutoff and I just exited. But it was then that I realized, it's not about the relationship. And I work with a lot of people who have been divorced for 3 or 4 years and they still feel like their former is controlling everything. Mm-hmm. Well,
oh yeah.
Why wouldn't they if we're allowing it? And so like when we talk about the co-parenting, the toxic person is not going to go away unless you make them go away. And by making them go away, we have to stop feeding them with the things that make them feel secure. So for those of you, sadly, who are trying to co-parent with somebody who you left a toxic relationship with, you have to remember, if they weren't a good team parent with you during the marriage, they are not going to be a good co-parent. But for some reason, we come out of it thinking, okay, good, we're out of that. Now we can just be the best co-parents ever.
Yeah.
And that's the reality is that is absolutely not going to happen. They will continue to be the same person because their drive for self-security and control and power is exactly the same. So what I have people focus on is, if you think back of the poor kids when they were in the situation when you were married, they did not really have a peaceful place. There was not a lot of place where there was peace, there was stability, where there was unconditional love. And I know it's so heartbreaking to break up the family unit. It's very, very devastating. And you carry the guilt with that for a long time. So I always tell people to look at it from this way. If they don't have a place of peace and stability and unconditional love, then at least when you have them for your 50% of the time, they have a place that's peaceful and stable and they're loved unconditionally, which is 50% more than they have in a toxic environment.
Yeah. And it is the one thing that I say to parents that are dealing with this is it just takes one. It just takes one parent to be the one who gets their kids' needs met. And as kids grow up, yes, that might be Disneyland dad or Disneyland mom who is hustling to get their own insecurities met and the power and the control and all that stuff. Eventually they'll hopefully become wise to who that parent really truly is, right? Yes. And so it is important, and this is really what I want to sort of transition to, is how to be with your kids when you have a toxic partner. One of the things that I know is, look, we don't make our kids a part of that chaos as much as we possibly can. And that does include not throwing your ex under the bus and talking badly about them, even if your ex does that about you, right? So can we talk about that? Because I think that's gotta be painful to, and very hard not to. So what do you say about that?
So the thing that you have absolutely, and you should write this and put it on your refrigerator if this is your situation. You have to remember that you are out of this situation. The kids are still in it. And so now we start looking at the kids like, well, what's the matter with you? How come you're acting like this? Or how come you're so upset? They are still in it, or they're in it 50% of the time. So you have to put yourself back and think about what you acted like when you were in it, because they're going to respond to the toxic person this same way that you do. They're going to avoid conflict. They're going to not want to make them mad. They're going to be way more comfortable with you being mad at them than the toxic person. So put yourself back in that situation, because that's the situation your kids are still in. And you always know when they come back from that household, it is chaos. Right?
Yeah. Okay. Deprogramming needs to happen. You need to calm them back down. Yeah.
Yeah. Because if you think about when you were in it, it was 100% chaos and drama the whole time. Yeah. So the kids are in chaos and drama again when they're there. So I always say, don't plan anything for the transition night. Make it a movie pizza night or a puzzle pizza night or whatever. And don't ask them about stuff that went on. Just be like, yay, it's movie and pizza night, and let that night be that night, because they need some downtime from that absolute chaotic situation. And all you have to do is remember that you know what it felt like. And it allows us to give the kids a little bit more grace.
And not only do you know what it feels like, and what I hope you learn is that what you could have used is some real empathy and some real support, calmness, unconditional love, which is exactly what you need to create. And that needs to be your highest priority. And I say that as a question, you've said that. And that also means, so I'm thinking of a client right now, as I say this, that when, in this case, it was a mom, and dad shows up at the soccer field. Everybody loves dad. Dad is the hero, right? Nobody sees the side of dad that she sees. And the kids love him, and total Disneyland dad, total yes dad, all this kind of stuff. And I think what this requires of you is to dig deep and just say, I'm not going to let that bother me. I am not going to let that, because that's just not the truth of it. And you can love him all you want, but that's not who he is. And I can live my life without their approval of me. Right. And I have to be secure in myself that it doesn't matter. Right.
Right. Yeah. But the other thing, you can make it very simple, because if you think about the Disneyland dad and the baseball coach, and I always have to apologize because I tend to pick on the husbands, but that was my situation. I have just as many male clients, so when I pick on the husbands, I apologize to the listeners who it's, what I'm saying.
We're two women. I mean, that's all we have. Yeah, right. Yeah.
But if you take that Disneyland dad thing or that over spoiling mom thing and you put it into perspective, there's always a public and a private character of a toxic person. And if you think back to the 4 things they want, their control and power is behind closed doors, and their attention and admiration is out in public. So the Disneyland dad and the soccer coach and the everybody loves me and the big giver at church, that's because that's where they're getting their attention and admiration feed. So if you can make yourself go, oh, he's just feeling insecure, so he's needing some attention, it makes it way easier on you to stomach that.
Right. And you can almost be like, oh my gosh, how pathetic.
Yes. Right? And there'll be a time if you can continually picture those 4 things, and you'll just go, oh my gosh, this is so easy. You've got to be kidding me.
I love it.
But you know what, going back to like, how do we interact with our kids in a situation like this? Because it is frustrating. It is frustrating. And it always feels like there's never any consequences, and nobody holds them responsible for their actions. And what I found worked really well, and sometimes it depends on the age of the children. But I started saying, you know what? That's how your dad's been since I met him. He's always been like that. That's just what your dad does. Because as the kids get older, they start going, that is what dad does. Or he's right. Mom does that all the time. Because to your point, we don't want to 100% protect them from the true person, because at age 18, you want them to have enough knowledge to make a decision on what type of relationship they want to have with that person. So you don't want to always be making excuses. And, so it's much easier for you to go, it's much easier for you to say, you know what, your dad's been like that since the day I met him. And then it starts them thinking of, oh yeah, I remember when that happened 3 years ago. And I remember and they will start also by themselves figuring out this cycle, and I think one of the other really tough things is we are already dealing with the guilt of the splitting up the family unit. It's nobody wants to raise their kids in a divorce situation.
No.
So, but when it's a toxic situation, especially one that's unhealthy, you have to remember that the reason that you're divorcing or separating from this person is to get them out of your life. It's not to divorce them and go for Taco Tuesday. It's not to divorce them and then open Christmas presents with them on Christmas morning, because that is very confusing to the kids. The kids go, what, you guys fight all the time when you were married, and what, now we can go out for tacos and now we can open Christmas presents? So you also want your kids to be aware that this is the reason that I'm not in that, because as they grow up, you want them to see what the true colors of the toxic person is, because we want them to be able to make their own decision.
Okay. So a couple questions. Yes. Okay. So I'm just thinking here. So I like that you just clarified we are not making excuses for him. Her.
Yes, I know.
Yeah,
People will get it.
I know. Yeah.
They'll understand.
Give us some grace. And actually I do have a male client that had that. And I kind of want to ask you about that too. So, okay. So we're not making excuses for them. We are saying, yeah, sometimes mom, dad can be like that. And I like that. I like that you are sort of validating that. And I think it's also helpful to say, and I know sometimes that hurts. And I know
you can also say, you can also say, and that's not really normal behavior, because that did hurt your feelings. So just know that that you don't want to hurt other people's feelings, because then they start going, because the toxic personality will hurt your feelings and then tell you your feelings shouldn't be hurt. And that's very confusing to the kids.
Right. Okay. And then what you were just saying, yes, you're not here. You're here to cut them out of your life entirely. And the point that you were making was, let's not have Taco Tuesday together. Let's not do all of this stuff. It's confusing to your kids. We want them to make up their own minds about that relationship.
And at the end of the day, it's also about your mental safety. And because they're emotionally abusive, all they need is contact with you to say something to cause an emotional reaction. So like when I help people write parenting plans and stuff like that, the least amount of contact points during the week is the best, because any interaction that you have with them keeps you subject to their toxicity. So you have to accept the fact that this is now two separate households. You can't control what goes on there. He can't control what goes on here, finally. So you have to make sure you don't let him. One of the other interesting things, and I bet you run across this in your work, is I found myself when I came out of that situation, my identity was completely gone. I didn't know who I was. I couldn't make decisions. I couldn't order off of a menu because he was always telling me what he wasn't saying, this is what you're eating, but he would say, how come you're having chicken? Like, I always had to justify everything. But I found that after I was out, I was very scared that my kids were going to be mad at me. And I still struggle with this today, because we don't want people mad at us. We don't like that feeling of somebody's mad at us. And I went through a couple of years where I realized I was catering to my kids the exact same way I had been catering to him. If my kids were mad, I'll fix it. Okay, I'll pay for it. Okay, keep the fires out. We don't want anybody mad. And I am now to the point where I believe if your kids aren't mad at you at least twice a week, you are not doing your job.
Right.
But we carry that, and we also carry that, well, if they're mad at me, it's going to push them towards the other parent. So we tend to try to be friends. Your kids don't need a friend. Your kids need a parent. And if they have to be mad at you, it's okay. That means you're doing what you're supposed to be doing.
Sometimes kids get mad at parents.
Yes, because that was a very, and still to this day, my kids are grown now. And still, if I find out one of them is upset with me, I'm like, if I let it, it would ruin my whole day. I have to stop and go, it's totally normal for people to disagree. It's okay.
Okay. So here we are. As we sort of wrap up a little bit here, and you have the best item for us in the toolbox, which I can't wait to tell people. We've got somebody who is listening right now who's like, okay, I think that, I am married to a toxic person. I have a couple of kids. And now what? What do I do about this? Do I file for divorce right away? Do I go into couples counseling? What do I do? What do you suggest they do? And I know that you can't say one answer for every single person because it's all individual, but like, what are some ideas that they can do? Where do they start?
Okay. Well, my opinion, and this is strictly my opinion, I never, ever recommend couples counseling if there is somebody that has a controlling, manipulative personality.
Okay. Why?
Because what they do is they tend to use it against the person. And here's the thing. I would have never stepped foot into a counseling session with my former, because in counseling, we're supposed to be able to tell the truth. We're supposed to be able to be honest. Yeah. If I was honest in there, I have to go home and live with him.
Right. And that is attention and admiration, which is external. And so it's going to be Mr. Wonderful or Mrs. Wonderful in therapy, probably, right?
Yes. And you are going to pay for whatever you said in therapy.
Okay.
But that's everybody's own decision. So
Okay.
I'm not saying don't go. I have a couple podcast episodes on that, but
okay, good.
You'll have to redirect me. Oh, where do you start? Okay. If you are unsure, because I was unsure for 14 years, if you are thinking something feels off, but I can't put my finger on it, it might be toxic, it might be not. He's nice on Tuesday, he's not on Wednesday. It gets very confusing because it's not 100% bad. Yeah. If it was 100% bad, you would have already made the decision. So here's some reassurance for the listeners. You are not going to leave until you are ready to leave. It doesn't matter if mom tells you, it doesn't matter if your counselor tells you, it doesn't matter. You will leave when you're ready. So in the meantime, learn everything you can about how the toxic personality works. Okay. And that's basically what I teach. And there's other great people out there that teach it. It's not like I'm the only one that teaches it. But if you're wondering, I do have something on my website called the Toxicity Profile Analysis. And it's 106 yes or no questions. And I actually use it because I get results that really help me if someone schedules a session. But if you take it and you never schedule a session, just you reading through those 106 questions and you having to answer yes or no, you're going to have quite a bit of validation that, oh, I've been living with that so long, I didn't even know that was not normal. Yeah. So start seeking some validation, because once you can put your finger on that maybe this isn't unhealthy, then you can move on to the next step of, okay, what are my next steps of, how do I get out of this? Or how do I stay in it and not let it affect me? Or, because until you can identify exactly what it is, how do you know which steps to take,
And look,
there's 1,000 podcasts out there with information on it.
Well, and we want to listen to It's Not Normal, It's Toxic, Rid Your Life of Toxic People by Dr. Dr. Heidi Brocke, who is kind of like Rocky. You should see her pipes, by the way. She's got some pretty big muscles in the best possible way. And so we go to your site, coachingwithdrheidi.com, and you can get the Toxicity Personality Analysis. Is that what you said it was called?
It's called the Toxicity Profile Analysis. I always say TPA just because it's easier, but it's just really makes you think on things that maybe you wouldn't have realized because they've been going on so long.
And best to really know and follow and work with somebody who's been through it than somebody who has it in theory. I am in the trenches parenting, a high needs child and all of that stuff. So I know what I'm talking about, and I don't have perfect days. And you know what you're talking about because you were through it, like you said, 7 times it took to leave. And so like that honesty is real. And, it's complicated. It's messy.
It's hard.
And there is hope. And there is hope that there are people like you who can help guide you through. And I really hope that this was helpful to my listeners, because look, it's out there, and, and like we said, we didn't even talk about having people in your life who are toxic and how you deal with that. And that I would, that's a great topic too. But when you're parenting, I just want to sort of leave with the overarching message that I heard you say, which is our kids need a place of peace. They need it to be stable, and they need unconditional love, right? They need you to be that person, and our kids are watching us. We need to model that for them. And we need to understand what drives a toxic person is deep insecurity, mental illness, that sort of thing. But it's driven by this insecurity, and that they need control and power, which happens behind closed doors. And they need external validation, which is attention and admiration. And if you just understand what makes them tick, you do not have to take it personally. It doesn't have to upset you so much, because you probably are an emotional person, a sensitive person, right? Which is why they got you in the first place. Mm-hmm. Is that fair to say?
Yes, all of that is fair to say. And the other thing, Now, we didn't talk about this, so I'm just going to throw it in at the end.
Sure.
And if so when I left and my situation was crazy, I told you this at the beginning, but I just thought of another point with it. I at first had to leave my kids, and he kept them from me for 5 years. And so I did the only thing I could do, that every time I could have a touch point, like he wouldn't let them call me. He blocked me so I couldn't call them. It was awful, awful. But what I did is anytime I did have contact with them, I made sure that they knew I loved them no matter what. There's nothing they could do that would ever make me stop loving them. And if they ever needed anything, I would be there. Right. And everybody would always say, I'm kind of getting tears. I'm sorry.
Yeah, that's good though. I get
people
it.
would always say they will come back. They're going to come back to you. And by year 4, I was like, they're not coming back. Well, sure enough. And you know what? They told me, we always knew you would be there. We knew why you left. And they even have told me, we're so glad you left, because what if you didn't and none of us ever got out? Yeah. But they will cling to the fact that you are their stability and peace, 100%.
Yeah. It just takes the one. And I'm sorry that was so hard. And I appreciate your honesty in saying, look, I left my kids. And I think that for most people, that is the worst case scenario. And you did what you had to do in your situation. And it is not a one size fits all. And that's the thing, right? We all come at this from different experiences, backgrounds, and all that stuff. So it's just not easy. And it's probably the hardest thing you've ever had to go through in your entire life. Right?
Oh, absolutely. But you know what? It is hard. And when people are looking at it, all they see is this huge mountain, and how are they ever going to get over it? But what you're doing where you are right now is hard too. So choose your hard, because at least you're getting somewhere.
I love that you said that. I say that all the time. Like, you're already uncomfortable. So why not choose a different way that'll actually bring you peace, love, and joy? Yep. And that just sounds like I just picked it out, but it's true. Peace, love, and joy. Like, this is costing you peace and joy and love and all of that, and confidence and all that stuff. So I just want to say that so we'll go to your site, which is in the show notes, coachingwithdrheidi.com, to get the toxicity profile analysis. But you have something really special for our listeners in the Parent Toolbox. So if you're not a member, join. It's free, parent-toolbox.com. And it is 10 critical questions to ask when seeking an attorney for a high conflict divorce and child custody situation. So thank you so much for that. That is going to be so helpful. Yeah. And
that's just imperative that you have an attorney that understands that personality, or that's not your attorney.
Yeah. Absolutely. You need somebody who knows how to fight the fight, or whatever. I don't even know. Is that right? Would you say?
Or not fight.
Or not.
Because, because if you think about now all I can control them with is the divorce process. So I'm going to fight over everything. I'm not going to agree to anything. I'm not going to show up for hearings. So you have to have an attorney that understands that now the control is coming through the process.
Yeah. Such a good point. Okay. Thank you so much, Heidi Brocke, like Rocky.
Yes.
She's got those pipes. This has been wonderful. Thank you so much for talking to me, for sharing, and for teaching us. I think that, people will really learn and hopefully have a better life because of it and because of you. Thank you so very much.
Yes. Thank you so much for having me.
Thank you for listening to this edition of my podcast, Parenting Our Future. I'm parent coach Robbin McManne, and if you're enjoying this podcast, please share it with someone who you think might also need to hear this message. And don't forget to subscribe, and if you like my work, I would be grateful if you gave me a 5-star rating. For those of you who like my content and want more, visit me at yellingcurebook.com to get your copy of my book and to find other resources to help you. Until next time, I am wishing you and your family peace and connection.